Every year, thousands of people pay premium rates to sleep in famously haunted bed and breakfasts. They pack EMF meters and voice recorders, hoping for a supernatural encounter, despite the statistical reality that they are almost certainly going to spend the night entirely alone in a quiet room. This diagram maps out the anatomy of ambience. To understand why we seek out this fear, we must look at how a haunting is constructed. It relies on a psychological recipe with 3 ingredients: setting, lore, and isolation. To test this recipe, I booked a stay at the Beechwood Inn in Barnstable, Massachusetts on Halloween night. The environment starts working on you before you even cross the threshold. Barnstable is a quiet, isolated Cape Cod village. On this night, a stiff wind whipped through the large beechwood trees, causing the heavy limbs to loudly creak. As I walked up to the wraparound porch, the wind caught the inn's wooden rocking chairs, pushing them back and forth frantically without any occupants. I knew it was just the weather, but that is the precise function of our first pillar: setting. These environmental cues actively strip away your rational defenses and prime your brain for a threat before you even check in. My testing ground for the evening was a famously active space on the property known as the Rose Room. The interior of the room carries a heavy historical weight. You are surrounded by aged wood floors, a massive solid mahogany canopy bed, and a framed vintage portrait of a boy staring directly back at you. My immediate instinctive reaction upon dropping my bags was to take that intense portrait and turn it face down on the mantel. When an environment so perfectly mimics the aesthetic of a classic horror story, your brain does the heavy lifting. It acts as a catalyst, automatically filling the dark corners of the room with perceived dangers. But a creepy room isn't enough on its own. A successful ambiance requires the second pillar: lore. It needs an origin point. For the Beechwood Inn, that origin dates back to 1975, when the nearby 1716 Barnstable house caught fire. According to local legend, firefighters racing to rescue an elderly woman trapped in an attic window instead watched her apparition float away from the burning building, eventually settling at the Beechwood Inn. That story gains crucial psychological weight because of the innkeepers, Ken and Deborah. When they bought the property, they were firm skeptics. That skepticism held until one afternoon when Ken was outside landscaping. He saw an older woman with grayish-white hair standing by the travel brochures. He went inside to help her, but the hallway was empty. Going back outside, he saw her again. With no cars in the driveway, he realized he was playing hide-and-seek with an apparition. Soon after, Deborah was washing sheets when she heard music coming from a guest room. She opened the door, and a phantom voice chirped, "Good morning." She immediately backed out of the entirely vacant space. When logical authority figures, the property owners themselves, break their own skepticism and admit to seeing things, it removes the guest's burden of proof. It gives you implicit permission to believe the lore. The lore specifically claims that the ghost of the older woman has a habit of targeting the Rose Room, notoriously throwing the deadbolt and locking the door from the inside after guests check out. Which brings me back to Halloween night. To test the final pillar, sensory isolation, I decided to take a long soak in the room's bathtub. The narrow architecture of a New England bathroom creates a tight acoustic chamber. The running water echoes loudly, drowning out your surroundings, which naturally amplifies your physical vulnerability and distorts external sounds. As I leaned back into the water, a door suddenly slammed shut, echoing through my supposedly empty wing of the house. I quickly shut the water off. Through the sudden, heavy silence, heavy footsteps crossed the hardwood floor and stopped right outside my door. I tried to rationalize it as the owners doing a security check, but when the door slammed a second time, I completely abandoned my professional objectivity. I scrambled out of the bathroom, locked myself in the bedroom, and spent the rest of the night watching a Disney Channel marathon. Sensory isolation effectively weaponizes the established lore. Deprived of clear information, your brain enters a state of primal survival. It takes mundane noises, a floorboard squeak, a shutting door, and interprets them as an imminent supernatural threat. But then morning arrives, and daylight systematically restores rational thought, dissolving the anxieties of the night before. When I went downstairs for breakfast, I found the innkeepers happily chatting with a foursome of good friends. It immediately became obvious that these late-arriving guests were almost certainly the source of the heavy footsteps and slamming doors. Does possessing this perfectly logical, earthly explanation ruin the experience of staying in a haunted room? This chart illustrates the reality of the haunted tourism industry. If you look at the search for undeniable scientific proof of the afterlife, the data flatlines. But if you chart the search for an experience, the value skyrockets. The earthly explanation changes nothing, because proof was never the product being sold. The true value of the Beechwood Inn and the broader haunted tourism industry is that it offers adults a carefully curated space where they are granted permission to simply believe in a ghost story. So when visiting historical haunts, leave ghost hunting equipment behind. Stop capturing anomalies on camera. Surrender to the environment. Let the old floorboards creak and enjoy the thrill of safely living inside a nightmare.